Tianyun. I think you're just using name Joy. Joy is good.
Okay. I am Joy Wu, a professor in the master and doctoral programs of acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine at the University of Eastern and Western Medicine, Sunnyvale, California. I own and operate 2 Chinese medicine and acupuncture clinics. My work as a professor and clinical doctor complement each other and have strengthened my passion for traditional Chinese medicine. I treat people across the spectrum of human life, from birth to and through the passage we call death as a lifetime closes. In this way, I help to release the dying in as much health as possible from bodies prepared for this natural process of transition and growth. My first observation of a patient's death occurred with a 60-year-old retired nurse I will refer to as Anne. Anne came to me with sciatic pain, which I successfully treated. A few months later, she returned because she had fallen and strained her arm. During this visit, Anne confided to me that she was alcoholic and felt depressed after retiring from a nursing position she had held for 40 years. She loved my acupuncture treatments, and we quickly became friends. Suddenly, Anne didn't show up for her 3rd treatment. A month passed without word from her. Noticing her file on my desk, I decided to give her a call. It was a Monday. Anne's husband answered the phone and said, "Anne is dying. She came home last Friday from the hospital and is dying at home." It shocked me. I could not believe Anne was dying and decided to visit her. I found Anne in her living room with an oxygen tube in her nose, lying on a hospital bed. Her breathing was labored, with a gurgling noise from her throat and mouth. She had a slightly yellowish pale and withered complexion. Her mouth was open, and I could clearly hear phlegm impairing her breathing. Checking Anne's pulse, I found it was big, empty, and floating. When I applied some needles on her arms, Anne's husband saw her breathing become smoother and deeper, and her fingers started to move. He was happy to see this response. I noticed her breath was now reaching down into her belly. I wanted to continue acupuncture treatment since Anne was responding so favorably, but Anne's husband told me that Anne's family had accepted her terminal prognosis and had arranged for a hospice nurse to administer morphine for pain management every 2 hours. Anne's deep coma had left her body flaccid except for her very loud breathing. I gave my blessings to Anne and her husband and left with a heavy heart, knowing there was more healthy and compassionate way to support Anne through her inevitable dying process. My second observation of a dying patient happened with the mother of a student. She was an 87-year-old Vietnamese lady who had suffered a stroke 3 weeks prior to her death. I shall refer to my student as V and to his mother as MM. MM was found unconscious one morning at home. The family called 911, and MM was taken to an emergency room and admitted to an ICU. V asked me to visit his mother after my class. We found MM in a coma. Multiple tests and a brain scan determined that her brain was severely damaged and recovery would not be possible. Except for feeling cold all the time, especially in her legs for several weeks prior to the stroke, MM had been healthy and had no known chronic illnesses. Now she was connected to machines for life support in the ICU and had a big breathing tube in her mouth. MM was a thin person. Her body felt warm and her face was yellowish pale white with a glossy shine. Her legs showed some edema, likely caused by the great amount of IV fluids infusing into her body. I encouraged V to massage his mother and give some acupressure. As V touched his mother, I saw her respond. MM's eyes moved. She stretched her arms and legs and made chewing motions, but with the breathing tube in her mouth and down into her throat, she couldn't verbalize sound, release tension orally, or release dryness from the body. I felt sad to see MM like this. The family was facing the decision of whether or not to remove the hospital life supports within 3 days. They questioned who would care for MM if she were taken home, and hurriedly decided to leave MM where she was. Surprisingly, when oxygen support was removed, MM was able to breathe on her own. Family members rotated to watch MM overnight. When V stayed overnight, he noticed nurses coming into the room and attempting to inject morphine into his mother. V refused them, saying, "My mother already looks peaceful. She has no sign of pain or discomfort. Why does she need morphine?" On the 5th day after removing life support, MM died peacefully. That day, V had visited his mother before coming to my class. Right before V was going to leave she opened her eyes and looked at him. V was so happy. He told his mother that he wanted to take a picture of her. Seemed to understand him and looked at his camera. V left the hospital and came to class. 10 minutes after the class began, he received a call and left. It had been from the hospital, telling V his mother passed. The following week, V shared the story with me. He was happy he was able to take a picture of his mother right before her passing. In today's world, death and dying often make people feel cold, depressed, and fearful. So often people associate death with something negative. Even hearing the word death can send chills through the body or invoke sadness. It doesn't have to be this way. People can generate and cherish a new understanding of death. Death can be seen as a beautiful event and the start of a new life, like the birth of a child. Humans can depart from this world with strong bonds, compassion, humbleness, wisdom, love, and respect for each other. Tibetan Buddhism teaches and practices this pathway for compassionate dying. The next 2 cases present examples of healthy, positive deaths. The first case came to me through my mother. My second story of conscious dying is from one of my clinical cases. My mother is a good example of someone gaining knowledge and cultural wisdom through shared life experiences with her elders. Every individual is influenced by their cultural and spiritual beliefs. My belief as a traditional Chinese medicine doctor is that the dying process should be as conscious as possible and natural. I believe Chinese culture and traditional Chinese medicine carry deep understanding about human life, death and dying, and life after death. The growth of modern science and technology has become so rapid and invasive that as a species we have lost sight of the importance of learning from our elders, parents, grandparents, and ancestors. Elders have many beneficial things to offer younger generations, and culture is nurtured through this invaluable sharing of knowledge and wisdom. If we part too far from our elders, we may lose the heart in our culture. My parents are healthy and active and currently live with me. My mother is 72 and my father is 78. My mother's mind is sharp and she can recall many detailed memories and stories from her life. She grew up in the countryside in China amid thousands of years of accumulated traditions and civilized culture. What is considered a good or a bad dying experience in Chinese culture? My next case study describes my great-grandmother's death through a story my mother shared with me about the death of her father's mother. I will call her Gigi. Gigi was considered a shamanic woman in her day. She was intelligent, quick, and alert. She was also a country midwife and doctor. Her uncle taught Gigi Chinese medicine because no schools formally taught Chinese medicine. Gigi helped many people and saved lives. People came by horse-drawn wagon from surrounding villages and beyond to see her, often bartering goods such as cottons, clothes, or harvests in exchange for her services. When I was little, I went to her 60th birthday celebration. It was filled with merry people, most of whom I didn't know. It made me laugh to see them kneeling down before my great-grandma. I grew up in the city, and these old traditions were foreign to me. Watching a while, I could see the pure sincerity of their actions. Some were bowing so low they knocked their head on the floor. It was a complete mystery to me why these guests would do that before my great-grandma. Today, I understand they did it because Gigi helped many people conceive and bear children, and because she saved many lives. "How did your grandma die?" I asked my mother. She answered, "When my grandma was closer to her 90s, she started to tire easily. She stopped working when she could not do any more. She was able to hear and to see without any problem. My mother told me that Gigi rarely got sick and was in good health until she died. 2 weeks before Gigi died, she said to her husband, 'I've had enough of my life here. It is my time to leave.' She washed herself, put on her clean clothes, and lay on her bed without eating. Families asked her if they could bring a doctor to see her, but she refused all the suggestions about taking medicine, seeing doctors, or eating food. She simply said, 'My time has arrived. It is time to return to heaven now. I have no desire to eat anything.' Respectfully, Gigi's family let her quietly and peacefully rest. They prepared. Family and extended family were notified. During this period, Gigi asked for particular people to visit her. My mother was one of them. Gigi had something to straighten out with my mother. She asked my mother to forgive her for wrongly accusing her of stealing a pair of jade bracelets when my mother was a child. Gigi found out another girl stole the bracelets. As my mother told the story, she was happy. With joy, she said, When I was little, I felt there was something wrong between me and my grandma. I felt she didn't quite like me. I didn't know why. I thought it might be due to me being naughty. When my grandma told me what it was before she died, I understood what happened, and I was very happy that she asked me to forgive her." My mother continued, "When old people are dying, they try to clear things up with living people. They don't like to carry these things with them and want to go with a clean and clear heart, with no worries or guilt." Gigi's last request was to have a bowel movement. That happened an hour before her last breath. Her husband carried her and held her from the back to let her sit on a pot. She was awake and aware. Shortly after, she passed away. Gigi died quietly and peacefully. During the 14-day transition into her death, Gigi drank only water. She had no incontinence of urine or stool. Gigi's body was kept on her bed until the next afternoon, after she died. At sunset, she was moved to a newly built soul shed. Her body was kept there for 7 days from the date of death and then buried. According to village custom, if the person who died was old, a big celebration was offered. The family would host an opera singer, dancing, and plays for several days. But if a person was young, succumbing to an untimely death from disease, accident, homicide, or suicide, there was no singing or dancing. Those funerals happened quietly, and people mostly felt sad. Gigi's natural death is considered the good way to die in Chinese culture. It is called 寿终正寝. It is one of the 5 fortunes. My second story of conscious dying comes from one of my clinical cases. I was using acupuncture and moxa to help a terminally ill patient have a peaceful life transition. I will refer to this person as BL and to his son as BJ. BL had a brain tumor and cancer for 6 months. At the end of radiation treatments, his body collapsed. He suffered extreme liver distension, pain, and bloating. He was diagnosed with liver failure. I first treated BL at home 1 month before he died. He looked emaciated. He had little muscle tone and scarce fatty tissue. His hands and feet were cold. His skin color was yellowish pale. Despite all of this, BL was in good spirits and showed a bit of humor. His mind seemed clear. He was polite, gentle, and positive. He was urinating frequently. Bowel movements were difficult. BL's tongue was red and cracked with no coating. His pulse was thin and deep. My traditional Chinese medicine diagnosis for him was both yin and yang deficiency, in addition to being qi and blood deficient. Apparently he had been on many medications. After his acupuncture treatment, BL felt energy returning to his body. BL told me just 5 months before he was strong as a cow. A week later, I gave him another acupuncture treatment, and BL said he felt very good after the treatment. On a Wednesday, 3 days before his passing away, I went to treat BL at his home again. It was 5 days after his last radiation treatment. BL was so tired he could barely get up. The right side of his neck and shoulder were in extreme pain. His liver was exceptionally distended and hurt. His ankle was also swollen. He had been lying in bed and finding it very hard to move. In addition to his scheduled medication, BL was taking pain medication every 4 hours. I observed a drastic decline in his wellness since the last time I had seen him. Acupuncture seemed to effectively reduce his pain. On Thursday, BJ took his father for a blood draw. The following day, BL's doctor told the family BL's liver was failing and he need not continue his medication. BL slipped into a non-responsive state later that evening. On Saturday night, I received news from BJ that his father was in a coma and he needed my help. It was almost 11 p.m. when I reached their home and found BL surrounded by his son, his wife, a woman of Thai descent, BJ's friend, and a registered nurse, Ada. BL was lying in bed in a coma, but was brushing his arms downward on his belly. BJ told me BL had received morphine, but it seemed to quiet him for only 1 hour. My friend and his father believed in a natural process of dying, and they wanted it for BL. BL was surrounded with great love, care, focus, and attention from us all, but he wasn't aware of it, and his body was cold. His eyes were closed with no movement. He continually moaned and brushed down his arms. I quickly applied acupuncture needles on his body. Within minutes of receiving acupuncture needles, BL started to wave his arms and touch his body, seeming to find himself. His eyes started to roll and move. He tried to open them. Finally, he did open his eyes, several times looking to see who I was, but there was no glimmer of light in the eyeballs. The moaning reduced. He started saying, "Far, far, far." He had not spoken this before the treatment. I gave BL an herbal tea. Ada fed him with a spoon. As the spoon touched his lips, BL opened his mouth and swallowed. Meanwhile, as I used the moxa box on his lower body, BL started to move his body and left arm more. His consciousness was trying to command his body again. Smoke filled the room from the moxa. Within 10 minutes of taking the tea, BL awoke with a big, beautiful smile. A look of pure happiness graced his face. It was the type of expression you see on a baby's face. He opened his eyes. Now BL's gaze was clear with a glimmer of light inside. It was as if he had awakened from a deep sleep. BL said loudly and clearly, "Amazing room, amazing room." He moved his arm, brushing his head. Although smoky from the moxa, the room felt pleasant. We were surprised BL had awakened. He didn't respond to questions asking him if he felt cold, but instead repeated, "Amazing room, amazing room." BJ said, "Do you want to drink some water?" BL replied, "Yes." Ada fed him water with a straw. Afterward, BL kept saying, "Amazing room, amazing room." Then his voice became fainter. He returned to the dream state and said, "Far, far, far." I kept moxa on his legs and feet and acupuncture needles in his arms and legs. I decided to add a few needles on his head as well. As I did this, BL murmured, "Father, Father, Father." Then, "Forever, forever, forever." I was surprised to hear what BL said, wondering what it meant. BJ and Ada returned after a short break. I had them place plastic padding beneath BL's back and bottom to catch any urine or feces that may come. About 10 minutes passed. BL burst into another radiant smile right before transitioning into throat breathing, saying, "Grandma, my family," 3 times in a very weak voice. Grandma, my family. His wife received the moment. BL changed to quick throat breathing just afterward, then long exhalations from the mouth only. There was no inhalation. BL's wife cried quietly, aware it would be her husband's last moment in life. Within 1 or 2 minutes, these breathing states had shifted. BL blew out his last big breath. His eyes were open. All of his activity stopped. In that same instant, I felt as if a wave passed through my body. I looked at the clock. It was almost 12:57 a.m. I knew BL's spirit left his body. I asked them to remove the plastic pad from underneath his bottom and dress him. The plastic held his final dark urine. There was no stool. Everything went smoothly. Dressed in his favorite clothes, BL was laid out on his bed. He remained there undisturbed overnight. When I returned with flowers in the morning, BL's face looked relaxed, and he wore a slight smile. I detected no expression of discomfort or sadness on BL's face. His transition was complete and beautiful. The family wanted to observe the Thai Buddhist funeral tradition. BL's conscious death experience set a positive tone for his funeral. 3 Thai monks chanted during the ceremonies. It was crowded inside of his home that day. I went outside to watch my daughter play with a little girl. A few of BL's relatives were also outdoors on the grass. While I was standing there, I gradually felt a swirling energy in front of my heart chakra. It was a feeling of peace, happiness, and joy being directed at me. Placing my awareness on this energy, a message came to my mind. It was BL's spirit coming to thank me. The swirling energy lasted for a few minutes. I had this energy swirling experience once before during a guided meditation with a master, so I was able to interpret the message I received in that amazing moment. BL's funeral was a wonderful experience. BL's wife and son recovered from their initial sadness very quickly, and both looked contented. A healthy dying event affects people's lives in very positive ways. Shortly, I will focus on this case to summarize the stages of the dying process according to traditional Chinese culture. Before doing that, I would like to offer concluding remarks for each case that I have presented. Case 1. Anne was dying in a deep coma and had received multiple morphine injections. Her breathing responded to acupuncture treatment, but due to the choices made by her family, Anne's dying was under the influence of morphine. This unnatural way of dying concerns me because we do not know the full spiritual or physical effects on human souls that pass under the unnatural influence of morphine and other drugs. Case 2. MM had aged naturally up to age 87. She had been healthy and had no significant health conditions. Unfortunately, when MM was found in a coma, she was sent to ICU care. After the medical tests concluded, it was determined there was no need to save MM's life. The hospital removed life support and injected morphine. Fortunately, MM was able to breathe on her own for 5 days, and morphine injections were kept minimal. MM was able to open her eyes before dying, her spirit saying its final goodbye to this world. Luckily, her son captured the precious moment. For the most part, MM remained in a coma once she reached the ICU, so there was no further communication between she and her family. The anesthesia drugs MM received prevented her consciousness from being awakened. As we can see, there are big differences between the two death experiences. The commonality is that both were healthy throughout their lives. This leads me to ask, how can we help people who are as healthy as MM avoid dying from hospital trauma in the future? How can we help people who are as healthy as MM be able to have late life transformation, as in the case of Gigi? These are my interests for elderly alternative care. Just as there is a healthy way to live, there is a healthy way to die. Families must not believe that removing life support is their only option in the final stages of treating terminally ill loved ones. Modern medicine hasn't been able to measure the spirit or soul because spirit and soul are not of the material world. There has been a significant lack of spiritual support during the dying process in many hospitals because of ignorance and inexperience in creating death transitions that nourish and support the soul. Case 3. Should we consider Gigi a spiritual practitioner? She was so aware of her consciousness that when her time to die came, she knew it and she accepted it with no hesitation. She was supported and surrounded by her loving family, following the old tradition. During her dying process, she was able to forgive and to allow anyone whom she had offended to forgive her. She was mindful. Her death was a peacefully conscious experience. Dying old is viewed as a life fulfilled and completed. It is considered good fortune for the soul. Gigi tried to clear unresolved karma before her soul left the human world. In Chinese culture, we believe this brings a free, fresh start for the soul in the next lifetime. Gigi's story is an example of healthy dying. A human death need not be associated with disease or happen in a medical facility. In traditional Chinese medicine, we teach that people can die with mind, body, and spirit held intact. This is considered the good way of dying in traditional Chinese culture, and it is still followed in China today. Traditional Chinese medicine's mission is to follow the Taoist teachings of the importance of being in harmony with nature and with all involved souls. In my great-grandmother's day, villagers believed death in old age is natural and brimming with positive energy for everyone involved. Case 4. BL had a beautiful, drug-free, natural, and conscious dying process, even with a terminal disease. His life ended due to progression of the disease combined with the deleterious effects of radiation treatment. I could see BL's spirit fighting for life, but his bodily functions were severely worn down and had failed. BL's consciousness revived with acupuncture and moxibustion treatment. The traditional Chinese medicine treatment gave his physical body an energetic boost so that his spirit was able to determine his next path. Until his last breath, BL was able to communicate with the people surrounding him. His dying process went smoothly with no sign of discomfort. There was happiness and joy. BL was encircled by love, care, and compassion. Most importantly, his soul journey was supported. Biel's spirit returned to him, and he was able to awaken and speak. Amazing room, amazing room. In our Chinese tradition, this is called
回光返照
He Guang Fan Shou. Hui means returned back home. Guang means light. Fan Shou means shining back. This is a common phenomenon that we observe in dying people. Taoist tradition says the astral soul, Tianhun,
天魂
Tianhun, is coming to bring the Dihun, subtle soul, back to the heavenly realm. Biel spoke to those around him. He expressed, Father, 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 forever, 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 suggesting to me that his spirit was flying away from his body as he was saying goodbye to his son. He continued his travels and reached the spirit realm, where he met and joined his family. That happened at the end when he surprisingly said, my grandma, my family, 3 times. Biel's final words brought much comfort to his survivors. It is a great relief for them to believe Biel was welcomed by his ancestors as he was dying. This is a benefit of dying consciously. Researchers have collated compelling evidence that suggests we do survive physical death. In traditional Chinese culture, people learned about dying and death by being present for the rituals in our very old traditions. Death was culturally ritualized rather than a medical event. People who grow up with similar old traditions learn about dying from everyday life, just as my mom did. My mother knew details of the dying process from her life through ritual, not medicine. Sadly, we have been losing the traditions of our elders. Elders have wisdom to pass on to younger generations. This is how culture forms. I foresee that if we become too disconnected from our elders, we will lose the heart of our culture. I conclude that a person able to die consciously will experience 5 externally visible stages. These stages are taught in Chinese culture and traditional Chinese medicine. Here is the common phenomenon as experienced by BL. Before coma phenomenon 1. BL experienced a lack of appetite, diminished interest in his surroundings, no desire to eat or drink, sleepiness all the time, lassitude, weakness, and feeling cold. According to traditional Chinese medicine, this indicates his life fire, yang, had been declining. During coma state 2, BL became unconscious without response to his surroundings, with shallow breathing and exhalations longer than inhalations. After consciousness was revived with traditional Chinese medicine, his body movement increased, eye movement resumed, he opened his eyes and was able to swallow liquid. Life returning phenomenon 3. BL suddenly awoke with beautiful smiles and was talking. Life seems to return. Some may even want to eat. This phenomenon may last for a few minutes or for hours. In Chinese culture, this well-known phenomenon is called returned light shining back. Saying forever and goodbye often are heard at the end of this stage. Lost internal Qi phenomenon 4. BL returned to being in a coma in this stage. His breathing grew more shallow with long exhalations. This stage can be long or short. A last bowel movement or urination can happen at this time. Afterward, the dying person may express seeing someone close to them who has died before them, indicating the soul spirit is reaching the heavenly realm now. Throat breathing to one last qi blowing phenomenon 5. BL expressed rapid exhalation through the throat. He blew out air a few times from the mouth and then had one long exhalation from the mouth. Following this, breathing ceased completely. How does moxibustion and acupuncture work to help in the natural dying process? It is well established that acupuncture treats conditions like anxiety, fatigue, and allergies. Acupuncture and moxibustion help people to feel energized. Feeling energized is a healthy state humans should continually experience. Traditional Chinese medicine has been used for around 3,000 years. Acupuncture and moxibustion are the two main methods of physical treatment. Often a technique called Gui Yang Zhu Zhen, which means 9 needles for returning the yang, is used to revive one who is unconscious or lifeless. When combined with moxa treatment, it helps to increase the body's yang qi and promote blood flow. Together they help to revive consciousness and life. There are a few acupoints on the body that have the same functions. Using acupuncture and moxibustion for dying people is new to Western culture. Western people tend to choose hospital care as the last resort for saving lives. Traditional methods are much less known. In traditional Chinese medicine, all illness is the result of imbalance or deficiency in yin or yang aspects inside the body. The vitality of any life depends on the balance and the amount of yin and yang. We can explain how yin and yang work in a human body through mechanical principles. When people get into their 80s and 90s, their physical bodies have depleted qi and blood. We often hear people refer to getting dried up as they get old. This is true. It refers to the yin aspects of the body, such as body fluids, water, and blood. These fluids are getting depleted. At the same time, we often see older people feeling cold, moving slowly, eating less, and getting sick easily. This is due to the yang aspects of the body, the life fire, qi energy, and transformation abilities are low. Human aging is the process of exhausting yang, life fire, qi energy, blood, and bodily fluids. If any of these are exhausted early in life, one can die well before the natural time. Reductions in strength, mobility, skin elasticity, hair color, mental functioning, and so on, are all due to declining yin and yang. If a person has a chronic problem or serious illness, it usually indicates one or several organs have become weak or depleted. Depletion of the yin-yang aspects of the body affects not only the physical body, making it weak, but also cognition, learning abilities, and emotional well-being. In traditional Chinese medicine, we believe the mind, spirit, and emotions are affected by physical well-being. In traditional Chinese medicine, mind, spirit, and emotion is called Shen, the same term as consciousness. It is supported by having the proper amount of qi and blood. I will use the mechanism of heating a kettle as an example to describe how these things work in a person. A kettle, like the body, with a steam whistle, like the brain, is filled up with water, yin, and then put on top of a stove with fire, yang. When the stove's fire is on and strong enough, the water inside the kettle can be boiled to produce steam. The steam is qi. The steam, or qi, thus blows to the whistle, like the brain, and a loud sound, consciousness, mind, emotional activity, is generated. The loud sound, call it consciousness, can be heard from far away. A signal is sent out from the brain and can be recognized. At death, it is very important for the soul to connect with the body through this consciousness to help the dying person transition to completion. However, if the fire of the stove is too low, small steam is produced. If there is no water in the kettle, there is no steam produced. If the dying person does not have enough yang, qi, fire, consciousness cannot be activated. Qi is the energy of vibration within consciousness. The stronger the qi, the more awake and active the expression of consciousness. From the example of the kettle, we can extrapolate that when one's qi and blood have been exhausted completely, a person's shen, consciousness, will be completely still. This explains why a dying one is so often in a coma or unconscious. You may have been pondering how acupuncture and moxibustion play a role in the conscious dying process. As you understand, consciousness needs energy, qi, to support it. Acupuncture and moxa provide yang qi to the body through a few specific acupuncture points. They support qi and blood flow to help the body carry essential life processes. If the human body is abundant with qi and blood, one can live. However, if one's condition has moved into the irreversible dying process, yang qi can help to revise enough consciousness for the body to die. In completion, what are the advantages of dying consciously? There are different levels of consciousness. For example, Gigi in case 3 and BL in case 4 were experiencing different circumstances and transitioned in a different way. Being conscious throughout death and dying, one can connect with nature's rhythm. In traditional Chinese medicine, we refer to this as heaven-human unity. There is a natural sense that it is not good to hold on to the past or have unresolved transgressions before death. The human ego starts to reduce and be cleansed. There is a desire to forgive and be forgiven. The most beautiful and blissful things we have heard from death, from the moment when the spirit is going to leave the body. When the soul starts leaving the body, it is becoming aware of heaven, divine nature. In being conscious while dying, one can relate what they are experiencing to the family and friends around them. These experiences are so profound and impact people in a very beneficial way. It can be a dying person's last gift to their loved ones. Dying with the support of traditional Chinese medicine offers increased chance of completing unfinished business before death. With consciousness, Shen Shi, it helps the soul to choose a much more purposeful direction and journey. Being conscious while dying will help the soul to understand its true nature and how it relates to life. It also helps the dying return into the light of the soul and follow the direction it should go. It shows the soul how it is to be reincarnated. It may increase the understanding of reincarnation in others who witness the dying event. Chinese tradition believes a good ending